Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Hall Folk Podcast broadcast. I'm your host, Chuck Hall. In March of 2007, I took a trip down the East Coast to catch up with some musical friends, Tony Baker, Don O.J. Dunaway, Charlie Robertson, and Craig Bickart. I recorded interviews with these friends for the Hall Folk Podcast broadcast, and it is a delight to be able to share them with you in this way. I first heard Charlie Robertson's songs through the playing and singing of Don O.J. Dunaway at the Milltop Tavern in St. Augustine, Florida. They were some of the most literate songs I'd ever heard. That has not changed in the 20 years or so that I have known Charlie. In fact, from the time I first found him peeking around the corner of the Milltop at me, we've had a wonderful connection, a connection that has gone far beyond musical acquaintanceship into the far reaches of what we might call friendship. Charlie's songs are thumbnail portraits of culture from his very interesting perspective. The characters he writes about are absolutely real. The fact that many of them have not actually been born is simply not relevant to the discussion. They are everywhere around us, and we have never seen them. They hold their dignity, sometimes not, in the swirl of a culture that is, as Tony Baker might say, a dream come false. But there is behind it all a burning beauty that is the core of all true art, and Charlie Robertson captures that landscape and that paradox like no one else. He is a very great songwriter and a very dear friend. This is part one of the conversation I had with Charlie Robertson in March of 2007. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. You're listening to the Hall Folk Podcast broadcast on hallfolk.com. I'm Chuck Hall. Thanks for listening.
I need some small photos of you for me, from the end of the world watching color TV, singing radio songs with your feet propped up, drinking fabulous brew from a hot-to-go cup, with your eyes half closed and the wind in your hair, and a smile on your face and a crushed cigarette lets its stale smoke flow where no heart goes, but it never quite forgets. Just about the age that you are now, I had this wild affair with the mixed-up Gainesville daughter of a man who taught the alphabet, a woman who just mumbled, never knowing she'd been humbled by her faulty expectations about life on earth. Complexities of the virgin birth, hearts that love couldn't thaw, or possibly fight to a draw. It is strange I should recall to you such an unsuccessful labor as the truth begins to waver. Best old newfound friend of mine, the past is in our favor, 'cause it's back before your time. Sleeping underneath the overpasses, hiding from the rain. There were still runaways and people who just vanished in a fundamental panic, running crosswise from the auspices of the terrible wave. The slack-jawed, twisted hands of fate and the sobering text of what their families expect. It's strange I should regale you with a memory so jaded, a harangue so orchestrated. Best old newfound friend of mine, it's not that complicated, it's just back before your time. Save me from the moon, I've heard the moon can kill. I'm too in debt to die, I often feel I'm small change in a 10-cent sky. Save me from the moon. Back before your time, you know there were lots of kids like you who wish the future had a view. Best old newfound friend of mine. It's not that complicated. The past is in our favor, but I find I'm more confused by what was back before your time.
Well, I would understand them, and those would be funny for me. But I'm not sure how.
Well, that would crystallize my audience. It would make it just like if you don't get that,
right?
You know, this isn't for you in the first place. It's that tunnel visionistic.
Yeah. Well,
I think I'm going to turn, by the way.
I think you have.
Yeah. Anyway, tunnel visionistic,
and more than one, and more than one, as it turns out.
All right,
Charlie Robertson, welcome to the Hall Folk Podcast broadcast. Thanks for sitting down and letting us probe, as it were. we'll try to keep it mental.
Well, I have good co-payment insurance, so probe as you must.
Well, it's a really nice, warm, early March day in St. Augustine. It's 9 degrees back in Boston, where I'm from. So I'm enjoying this. I'm heading back in just a little bit. But I wanted to take the opportunity on this particular trip, to talk to Tony Baker up in St. Simon's and Don Dunaway across town, and yourself, as really interesting people that I had met on my journeys down here. So this is a great thrill for me. I'm really happy that we're going to get a chance to chat, and I hope that more people will get a chance to hear your musical offerings and musings and such, because they're really, really good.
Well, that's kind of the point of it. Yeah. I mean, it's like, golly, why don't I create something mediocre? As if this vacuum isn't vocal enough as it is. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, you were just talking a moment ago about a part of your background that I did not know. The University of Florida?
Yeah.
Journalism?
Right.
When? How did that come about?
Well, initially, it was during the unpleasantness in Southeast Asia, and I wanted to go to college. My parents had wanted to send me to college, and it wasn't so much a path of least resistance, but I'm not the most goal-oriented person that ever lived. But I loved sports writing. I like sports for the statistics. I like numbers. I like inventories. But sports writing, my dad, when he would travel, he would come home in the downtown train station, and I would always pick up a sporting news. And there's a connection there with him, but maybe we may or may not talk about it. But I would read all these out-of-town sports writers, and their language was so florid and colorful. So I decided that's what I sort of wanted to do. So anyways, I went to the University of Florida, and I got actually morphed over into the broadcast journalism side of it. So I graduated there in August of 1968. So that's it. With every intention of someday becoming a sports journalist of some description, like the guy in The Accidental Tourist who writes travel stuff but isn't that crazy about travel. I like some things about sports, and other parts of it are really repellent. But anyways, I was going to do it, and I also was interested in music and songwriting, and like so many of my cohorts, once I graduated, I was fodder for the draft, and I got that famous notice, which actually does start with greetings. Your friends and neighbors. I mean, thanks a million.
Really?
Your friends and neighbors have selected you to represent us in the armed forces of the Estados Unidos, and that's what happened. And
so you're blaming your neighbors? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I can get so comfortable with that victim mentality, I can just lay there like a slug and just bask in it. So anyways, yeah, and so I was drafted. I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, did my basic training, and was one of a small group of people who were whisked aside when orders for your next assignment were being given out. What most people got was called an AIT, an advanced individual training. But there were a group of us, because of what was called a civilian acquired skill, were given direct assignments. And I was given a direct assignment to Fort Riley, Kansas, as an information specialist, whatever that might have been. And so for the next 21 months, I worked in a replacement detachment, processing people into Fort Riley. And I spent massive amounts of time playing guitar and writing songs, and deciding that's what I wanted to do. Sports writing was no longer on the menu.
When did Heartland 1970 come about? Was that's about that?
It is
experience.
About that. A mutual friend from Oklahoma. We went for a drive on a Sunday, and we saw the results of these tornadoes, and it was just an unbelievable. Of course, we didn't have that type. We had that type of news footage about Vietnam, but domestic stories to drive into, and I had journalism background, to drive right into the aftermath of a news story without news coverage. It was incredibly sobering to see these farms just littered like tinker toys on the ground, and people just standing there, like in the aftermath of a wreck on the interstate, and they seemed to actually be wondering if they were still alive. And this is just sort of like a little tableau of that time, I guess.
Wow.
And also the hookers in Junction City, Kansas.
And was that true? At one point you said that was true.
On payday weekends, they would literally fly prostitutes in from Vegas or Atlantic City to military hubs, because there was just a cash crop like everything else, whether it's the news cycle or McDonald's or Blockbuster or decent dental work. It's all a cash crop now, and it was back then. Nobody talked about it. Huh. Except the guy's paying up front, And it's like here's JoJo and his Chevelle, and here's Monique in the back seat. Take it or leave it.
Right. Amazing stuff.
To some degree.
The bright lights of the heartland, they shine like diamonds in a poor man's eyes. Well, it's just heartfelt words of wisdom, remembered at the speed of light. Specks out on the highway, looking for some promised land, in a ruptured two-tone Chevy, on loan from Uncle Sam. We were north of Oklahoma, somewhere west of Tennessee, south of nowhere, worth remembering, defying gravity. And the bright lights of the heartland, they shine like diamonds in a poor man's eyes. Well, it's just heartfelt words of wisdom, remembered at the speed of lines. We were roaring across the prairie, where tornadoes ripped the land of the honest folks that worked and made their living with their hands. There are girls in Junction City working when the sun goes down. They get flown in from Las Vegas each time payday rolls around. And the bright lights of the heartland, they shine like diamonds in a poor man's eyes. Well, it's just heartfelt words of wisdom, remembered at the speed of lines. It's getting harder for me to see. It's getting harder for me to breathe. I got an old man's style, stuck with a young man's pain. Like a drumbeat pushing toward the top of the hill. Oh, I can't dance and I just can't stand still. Say hello to Ogden, Kansas. Say goodbye to Jacksonville. We've been blown off of the road by a lime green Coupe de Ville with the radio full blast about some dead rock stars abroad. We had Nixon in the White House, real problems with our God. And the bright lights of the heartland will shine like dimes in a poor man's eyes. Well, it's just heartfelt words of wisdom remembered at the speed of lights.
Hi, this is Craig Bickart. You're listening to the Hall Folk Podcast broadcast on hallfolk.com.
When let's go back a little bit. There's some things in some of your songs that talk about your I want to put this properly. Media has influenced you a great deal from the time of your youth, and it comes up in various places in your songs in the most interesting ways, because that's a shared experience that we have. And my earliest memories.
Your dad's a media guy.
My dad was a radio announcer for a long time, and I took a love to it, partly because when he came out of the service, he was into radio for a while, and some of my most treasured memories are of getting up early in the morning and going off to the radio station with my father, and watching him put together a newscast and deliver it and all of that. And of course, later on in life, I kind of did the same thing. But that whole it comes up in your songs in such interesting ways. I remember you once introducing the song "Dan Duryea," as a song about a B movie actor in an A movie world.
Yeah.
And I decided one time not long ago that I would someday, and maybe I'll actually do this with somebody, so sit down with someone who is not all that familiar with your music, and play
there's a small shot group.
Hey, you, hey, come here.
Here's Joe the ceiling worker. Here's Joe the drywall worker. What's your favorite Charlie Robertson song? He's like, would that be D-Cup Candy Stripers? I don't know. Good Lord.
But I mean, there's an example. There's a media milieu that just flows in and out of your songs. And what I was going to say, to complete what was passing for a thought there, was the idea that I want to play count the cultural references sometimes, because there's a multitude of them, and they are fairly subtle. I think they're fairly subtle, and some of them are located here in Florida, but some are just so culturally ingrained in us now that we kind of gloss over them.
Yeah,
and they just make themselves. They just turn up in your songs in the most interesting places. And that's all I really wanted to say.
Well, I think they're a product of living in a in a part of the country where you're not the go-to guy for commercial input. So you're getting a lot of stuff secondhand, but you've also reached the point where you've figured out your parents aren't experts. They're rank amateurs, and so that you know there's something going on, and you're not getting it. You know, it's not happening. You're not in the buzzing center of Boston or New York. You're in Jacksonville, Florida. You know, our values are, carpeting and drywall and NASCAR. So it's, there's something out there you're not getting. So media becomes a possibility. And
it becomes a necessity. That's the thing.
Necessity, exactly. It's like oxygen. It's like, well, this might be a clue to what I'm not getting. This big mystery of the big world.
And yet it's a tease, because it shows you things that it can't deliver. It promises what it can't deliver.
And I'm looking at this, and I'm not sure I do want to be. It's like the Gary Shandling show where he wants to be in the loop, and he's like, wait a minute, I've seen the loop. It's ugly. Get me out of the loop. I don't want to be in the loop. It's like, So, anyways, but it is. It's there. It's in all of our peripheral vision, and sometimes it's in the direct vision.
And sometimes it forms us. It forms our inner life as people who are involved in this particular culture. It tends to form our inner life in a way that is not healthy.
Well, the more isolated we get, the more we're willing to connect on any level. And if this is the only common area we have to talk about, we can at least start there.
Yeah.
What do you make of this Britney Spears business? I don't know, Norm.
Why?
I think the girl needs help.
Why did she shave her head?
Exactly. Why did I shave my head? At which point that squirrels start laughing at you, you got to do something. You got worse hair than me, but anyways.
Well, if the squirrels start laughing at you, Charlie, there may be other problems entirely.
That's exactly right. Dissed by forest creatures. Story of the film 11. Yeah.
So anyway, way back when, what did you start listening to? What was music around your home when you were growing up?
The great thing was music was everything. My dad liked just whatever was most current on the radio, but my mom listened to just about everything. Her mom was a serious student of piano, who I never really got to know. Her mom and dad died within a year of each other when I was 3 and 4 alternately. But her mom was apparently just a prodigious student of classical piano who played in a small country church in Newberry, Florida, a town of probably a couple thousand people just west and north of Gainesville, seat of the University of Florida. And so I'm sure that somewhere that genetic structure limped over to me. But and my mom just surprised us to no end. We moved into a house in Jacksonville, and it had this awful out-of-tune spinet piano that nobody ever touched. It looked like if you touched it, you'd best have a tetanus shot first. But one day when I was flirting with the idea of being a Cub Scout, all my den brothers were there, and my mom was serving Kool-Aid, and out of nowhere, and I'd never heard her play, sat down and by ear played the theme from Davy Crockett. Ding, 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 ding. And I was like, dude, that's my mom. That's my freaking mom. And it was the most galvanizing moment. It's like, I didn't know you could do that. I've been with you for 12 years now, and I didn't know you could do that. So anyways, but radio stations then, as you well know, would at the dawning of rock and roll still would say, well, that was the Andrews Sisters with this, that, or other, and here's Elvis with Shake, Rattle, and Roll. Then the Peter Gunn theme would be followed by something by Billy Vaughn and his orchestra. Then you'd have Dwayne Eddy playing, something that twangs the thing, and it would just go on like. Then you have Nat Cole, and it was just the greatest milieu of stuff, just endless possibility.
And that was before somebody decided, no, you know what the problem here is? The problem is that there's too much variety. We have to break this up.
It's interesting when variety is considered an unmanageable situation, and that's what we've moved into.
And the great irony of that is that now
the DJs, the personalities. Oh, right. My God!
Right. Well, there's a real prejudice in radio, particularly in small local in local outfits and stuff. there's a real prejudice I had discovered. One of the reasons why I'm doing the podcasting stuff now is because I sort of have control over this. It gives me. I was telling somebody the other day that
Chuck Hall, the Alan Freed.
That's right. That's right. This gives me the ability, the possibility of having radio without having the radio business.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal for me.
Well, it's like with us also, having music without the music business.
Yes.
I mean, we're under the radar of that as well.
Right. And the kind of music that we do is like that. But it's just it's fascinating to me to look at how in the early days of radio the music just becomes a delivery system for the advertisements.
Oh yeah.
And that's the hook, and that's your trade-off. Okay, I'm gonna hear something that I like, and then I'm gonna hear commercials because the allegedly that pays for it. That pays for my enjoyment here. Well, now we're at a place where on my way down here, we were talking before this actually began, I was listening to satellite radio and the satellite radio is there are stations on satellite radio that specialize in diversity.
Yeah.
And you probably remember this. The first time I came down here, there was a little radio station in Fernandina Beach.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I want to say it was the Hog. They called it the Hog. And
didn't they play the Americana format? No.
They played a really bizarre format, whatever it was. I mean, it was.
But it was actual local guys.
It was local guys.
Okay, no, I don't know that.
And it was AM because they used to do this.
Well, that's why then we didn't pick it up.
They used to do this the first time I drove through. I drove through Fernandina Beach, and they did this these parody these parody spots with the drum roll. AM mono 25 watts. Fernandina Beach, the Hog, WHOG. Next time I came down, it was gone. Yeah. But I thought as I listened to it, coming into St. Augustine from the north there, from Fernandina Beach, I thought, this is really cool. I would kill to work for a radio station like this. This is just wonderful.
And somewhere in the back of your mind is have I lost it? Am I really hearing this?
Right.
Is this real? Or have I just gone off the deep end?
Right. I've never been this far south before. Maybe I've driven off the planet.
Literally and figuratively, yeah. But a great thing about radio, too, was the part of your imagination that it activated. It's like a great performer who doesn't tell you too much. He actually respects you to the point that he says, here are the songs, I think you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, well, this song, The Red Rose, represents the blood of Christ on the cross, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, this is why, you should be the most dangerous man in the tire industry, not a songwriter. But...
or at least the most significant man in the traffic jam.
But, if you were a lonely kid in 1963 driving around in the rain, you had bad skin and no girlfriend, Roy Orbison, I mean, my God, that voice, and Roy knew what you were feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like, Roy had you covered. I have this song that I'm working on called Riding with Roy Orbison, and it's about that. It's about this guy he's literally doing that, and he pulls up to a pawn shop on 8th and Main in Jacksonville, and Roy's looking at the window at the sad guitars, and the rain's beating on his trench coat, and Roy, and you get in, and Roy rides with you, and you don't see him. You can see his smoke rings blowing over the seat, and that was a great. Now videos, of course, you don't have that.
Yeah,
your food is chewed for you, and
right,
but here it is.
But you have the advantage of having a lot of those images and a lot of the things that those images contain, the promise of those images from people like John Richburg.
Oh, John Richburg. Johnny R.
Yeah.
In Nashville. Oh, my God. For people like us, once again, who led a cloistered cultural existence, that John Richburg was a disc jockey who worked on a station called WLAC in Nashville. It was what was called a clear channel giant.
Right.
And there were a bunch of them. There were AM stations with huge wattage that just broadcast to the known universe. And he would come on late at night. And he was this. He has a brother who has a tire place here in town, or radiator service, Richburg Radiators. But John R. had this gravelly voice, and we just assumed he was black because he talked the talk, and that's what he played. And of course, black folks knew better, but us, of course, we thought Amos and Andy was somewhat real. So, but he had this voice like this is John R. from Nashville, Tennessee, WLAC, going out to the known world everywhere you may reside. And this is Slim Harpo talking about baby. Scratch my back.
Yeah.
And he said, this is the consolers with the child is on board.
Yeah.
We'll go gospel on you in the drop of a hat like a work of art. This is John R. LAC, Nashville. Give us a holler. And then he would have these specials for I think it was Rudy's Record Mart in Gallatin, Tennessee. He says, and if you get the John R. special number 3, here's what you're going to get for just $5.95. We ship to your doorway anywhere in the United States. You're going to get the Mighty Hannibal singing, fishing pole. You're going to get the Staples singers, blah, blah, blah. And it was just great stuff. And it was this whole world that it was like a forbidden world that as a squeaky white Presbyterian, you just weren't privy to otherwise. And you didn't talk about it until once in a while something would slip out in the conversation of a friend. You'd say, "Where'd you get that?"
I was just going to ask
say,
you.
"Oh, there's this guy I listen to sometimes." And said, "You're not talking," and yeah, that's it. And it's like you're suddenly this intergalactic brotherhood of the bozo that listened to John R. And it was everywhere. I've heard James Taylor mention it about when they would come down to North Carolina. He and when his stay in their whatever vacation digs down there, that they would listen to this. What they thought was a black DJ named John R. So anyways.
Hey, John R., what you gonna do? Come on, John R., man, and play me some rhythm and blues.
Hey, everybody. John R. Way down south here in the middle of Dixie. I'm back on the scene, and I'm back with Ernest. You ready for that? Tell you what we got. You got that little piece of paper I sent along with this record. Tells you all about all these albums we want to talk about. Great values, friends. Albums that you can get from Ernie's and save a lot of money. Ernie's Record Mart, the one and only, located right here in Nashville, Tennessee, and nowhere else but Nashville. All right? Okay, let's get on with the thing here.
In my father's house, there were shadows on the floor that ripped in through the windows back in 1964 or 65. And stained the walls where only I could see, like a food stain on a bad suit that was tailored just for me. Was I winking at the camera? Was there something in my eye? I was caught in freeze frame, hovering between denial and a lie, caught in a pose. Am I too big? Is this whole world too small? I can hear my father's voice somewhere down the hall. And I would stay there with the door closed till the walls would fade to black. And I'd listen to John Richburg and Slim Harpo scratch my back. There was no Armageddon bombshell in there waiting on my bed. Confusion gets a haircut, well, his neck remains bright red. And I'm walking in the moonlight on an old familiar path. I feel older than a brown-toned Walker Evans photograph. You play Death and the Maiden during rainstorms in your car, and you play for tips at a local motel poolside tiki bar. And you think about your father's house, where my father still lives. The houses stay the same, and he greets me on the front porch, shakes my hand and speaks my name. I can see he's so much thinner. He is amused I've lost my hair. And in that corner bedroom, all the shadows are still there. The town I call my home now has the fundamental feel of a cash crop gone from bumper to an understood ordeal. And we have mined our history poorly here, and we've sold it in the streets. And we've marked our past with t-shirt shops and framed them in concrete. But only I can find the shadows where my memories are stored. Slim Harpo and John Richburg, they have gone to their reward. And I find myself wondering what my reward will be. In my Father's house, things look just the same to me. And there are pictures in the hallway of us way back in our prime. Personal inquiries are not welcomed at this time. I hold the wall, my eyes cannot get adjusted to this light, and I feel just like a werewolf in a real bad mood tonight. In my Father's house, in my Father's house, in my Father's house.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was the same thing that Wolfman Jack represented for kids in California.
Sure.
This guy that got it, when their parents didn't get it, their teachers didn't get it. Wolfman Jack's got his arm around you. He says, "I got you covered, baby. I know you're lonely, but the world needs you. It needs people like us that get the big joke, and it was a great thing.
And it really is like a big in joke.
It is.
It really is.
Because everybody needs that. I mean, Sean Hannity needs it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be the way he is. He has to be the last righteous man.
Right.
So you just, I had this one thing. It was too strident even for me. It was going to be a sort of political song called "You Start with Hate and You Walk Backwards," and it's based on the formula that you choose an extreme viewpoint and then you sprinkle in some facts and you connect the dots. And it's like, see, I proved it.
Yeah.
And you're the one guy that knows the truth. And so, you're the last righteous man, and you know things that other people don't know.
Right. And so every little group becomes like the Gnostics. We have the special knowledge. Yeah. We really know what's going on. And and don't hold it against your neighbors. It's not their fault that they don't know what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
But they just
we're not necessarily going to invite them because I don't think they're going to get it.
I don't think they're going to get it.
This is just for us.
Right.
And it can be very comforting, but then you always end up having to change because at some point it becomes unsatisfying, or you just have to move on to something else.
Right.
Whereas there are people who are spiritual voyagers like you or Tony, who just are constantly fine-tuning the vision, constantly upgrading the transmission between them and God. And that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
And if there's something out there, please tell me. I don't want it all to myself, and I don't want to argue about it why you're wrong and I'm right.
Right.
Let's get on the A train here.
Right. Let's just break bread. Let's have a meal and talk. That's a great thing. Well, is that some of the
that's the dialogue I feel that art creates. It's my one audience with God. And if I can throw it out there, I write it and I'm smug about it, yakety yakety yak, and I'm not that thrilled with your success because I'm a bit threatened by it. But that's where it no longer is mine. I put it out there and hopefully it connects with someone.
You said something earlier before we actually got this going about the quality of your estimate, at least, of the quality of what you do being improved by the fact that you had put it down for a while as a career.
Well, I quit it as a career and have continued to do so. By the way, as my numbers in the on Amazon will attest. I'm like number 174,000 with an anchor. So, anyways, I was when I got out of the Army, to make a short story longer, even with the help of a variety of friends, not to the least of which were Gamble Rogers, Don Dunaway, and some other people. At some point, you have to carry the ball yourself. I had this sort of a rumor of a career that lasted from 1971 through late 1976, and it just is. At some point, it just was like the signs were all there. It's time to not do this anymore. I mean, you can still do music. It's like I got the education. I just didn't cash in on it, but I didn't forfeit the information.
Yeah.
And it just was like this light that went on. I'd reached the point that about 4% of what I was doing was music, as your quote unquote
yes.
career begins to upgrade. So, anyways, I just went through a series of Renaissance checklist man jobs, including being a bartender, a construction worker, running some music stores. I was a newspaper ad salesman for about a week and a half. and the greatest of all possible jobs, the most sensible all, I got married, And but then in early 1980, I got a job working in an auto parts warehouse for a large international shipper / proliferator of vehicles and parts. And I did that for 23 years. And when I went into it, I said, well, I'm going to do this for a while because I have a bit of that other thing we talked about before, the last righteous man syndrome. So I had the habit of doing things for a while and say, well, they don't get me, and quitting them. But there was something about this. I'm so, what is it, the right brain that's the creative side? Or which is,
I forget
whichever is the creative side, I'm overloaded with that. Not necessarily in a good way, but it's just way too much. It just runs, it's like a program that runs constantly. So I need the other thing for leverage. And a concept that I learned early on in the auto parts warehouse, when I'd see these little bitty guys. I'm a fairly big guy. I'm over 6 feet, and usually on a good day I'm 200 pounds. On a bad day I'm, a bit glutinous. So, anyways, I'd see these little 130-pound guys carrying around power steering gears, and I was having a problem with them. And I said, how are you doing that so easily? He said, well, because all the weight's on this end, you have to find the balance point. And that became this, it wasn't just a metaphor, it was so profound, it was like a meta 5.
Yeah.
So, and so and everything made sense after I embraced the concept of the balance point. It transcends all genres.
Right.
So I did this, and when I started, I said, well, these are going to be a bunch of mouth-breathing goobers who have nothing to say to a brilliant guy like me. And the more I stayed there, the more I learned the only thing standing between me and enlightenment was me. I mean, everybody has their story, and I realized these guys all had great stories. They're way funnier than people on television. And yet because of the formality of you're sitting there to be entertained, you say, "This is funny, isn't it?" Yeah. I love the kids on Friends, right. and they are kind of funny. But but I mean, these guys are hilarious.
Yeah, but the problem is that they don't have they don't come with a laugh track, and they don't have signs that say, "I just said so. Laugh now."
Yeah, or like in old country music, when you would have the funny guy was the bass player. Because he would have his teeth blacked out and polka dot pants. You say, when he says something, it's going to be funny. He's going to be funny. So anyways, but it was a great experience, and I did that for quite some time, and it gives you the opportunity, because when you're around people who think like you, and it's not that difficult to shoot,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you're literally preaching to the choir. So these people, you better bring your A game, especially if you're working with a bunch of black folks, which I did, and it was great because the language is such an item.
Yeah.
And I've always had that proclivity.
Yeah.
I love that the cradle of music that I come from, the South, where you can't get arrested doing most of that music, is just rife with the black experience. Even the white music is so influenced by it.
Yeah.
So it was just, it was shut up or join the team, and I joined the team.
Yeah.
And I joined the team for life. I still carry that experience, scars and medals, walking hand in hand to this day, and always will.
Monroe and his uncle, they're sitting down on the couch. Monroe goes to the window and he gets down in the crouch and he says, "Uncle, there's a white man in the driveway and he's stealing your car." Uncle says to Monroe, "Boy, sit your vague ass down. That man ain't stealing nothing that the law does not allow. That is an act of repossession. A phrase that strikes me funny, but it's a cornerstone in the pyramid of the white guy's sense of money." I spent 28 months in prison for a crime called B&E. And there's a little joint called Raver. It's the state-run B&B. And I made that license plate that's on the car that fool just jacked. It says a hot to go, hell, he can keep the car, want that cool plate back. Life in parentheses. Life in parentheses. Maxine walks the fine line between stoic and depressed. She sees faces at the mall, but she's not that impressed. She was raised on joyful noises, honesty and table grace. She's evolved to food court pizza and that mystery meat at the Chinese place. Is this some weird rehearsal? Or is this adult life? It's like time-release submission without being some guy's wife. She walks past the arcade and those vacant truant boys. Forget the demographics, just dissolve into the noise. She got decent indoor plumbing. She got a roof that seldom leaks. She got a so-so job as a nail tech at the Miss Pris Style Boutique. She got a boyfriend named Travis who cannot spell GED, but he's hard as nails and he's wired on dope and he smells like lust and motel soap. She got a life in parentheses. A life in parentheses. Early the next morning, Monroe goes to the repo yard, and he knows this white kid Travis that details all the cars, and he gives him $20 for his uncle's license plate. Surprise him with when he gets home from driving the bus tonight at 8. An old Maxine saving for a car, she needs $300 down. To buy this vintage cruiser, Travis said they just brought round. It is a sky blue Lincoln Town car. The bank wants to unload. Man, it's a dinosaur from Detroit for when muscle ruled the road. And she flirts with the black bus driver that drives her home today. She said, I could take you for a ride, buddy, you don't look that brave. He said, I like your purple fingernails, them tattoos on your legs, but I'd be robbing the cradle. She said, no, I'd be robbing the grave. And it's life in parentheses. Life in parentheses.
Hello. Natalie, it's Art, our song sayer.
Yes.
I never really...
It's Eddie.
Yeah. Well, what are you going to say as a song, and who are you going to dedicate it to this week?
I've decided to pick a hit song of current vintage called Round and Round.
Oh, that's one of the new ones. What is the story behind that song before you do it? Could you explain it all?
What?
Can you explain the reason why it was written?
Well, I didn't think that you were going to bring me up here and then throw a curve at me and make a fool out of me.
Au contraire, I was merely trying to find out a little bit about the song. I thought you might know it as a sidelight.
I don't have any idea. It's just another song that was produced, written, or whatever you say.
Well, are you all set to do it then? Eddie already over?
Eddie, are you all ready over there?
I'm already over here.
Where are you ready?
Over here.
Fine. All right.
All right.
Strike it up. Find a wheel and it goes round, round, round as it skims along with a happy sound. As it goes along the ground, 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 till it leads you to the one you love. Then your love will hold you round, round, round in your heart's a song with a brand new sound. And your head goes spinning round, 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 'cause you've found what you've been dreaming of In the night, you see the oval moon going round, round, round in two. And the ball of sun in the day makes a girl and boy want to say, find a ring and put it round, 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 and with ties so strong, the two hearts are bound. Put it on, the one you've found, 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 for you know that this is really love.
Very good. That fits your particular style to a T, I would think.
I think more than any I've done recently, don't you?
Really, it has a good meter to it. It scans very well. Well, thank you very much, and have a very pleasant Easter, and we'll see you again next week. And until then, Natalie Attired says,
won't you say a song this week?
But you've also got a great ear for that, and I think maybe the one thing that we may have in common is that all that media stuff at the early ages. At the early age, you begin to develop a manner of speaking that doesn't really sound local.
Yeah.
It's not local anywhere because you've absorbed all of this.
Yeah.
And if you happen to be tuned into that, and if you like language as you clearly do, then you're right. This particular geographical location is rife with a cauldron of such different things from so many different places. And I mean, if you happen to be tuned into it, that could be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It could be a lot, provided that you the great proviso there is that you're not preaching to the choir, that you're not being around other versions of yourself all the time.
Yeah.
And
yet that's very comforting, or it can be.
Okay, it can be, but I mean, after a while, it gets to be pretty stultifying.
I'm a guy that likes to eat. That's pretty obvious. But I've never thought it's 2:00. It's time for me to eat chicken.
Right.
Your diet is whatever you want it to be at any given time, and hopefully it's very diverse. So your culture, I can't imagine you wouldn't want the same.
Street, night air through the upstairs window made the bay breeze smell so sweet, and I was decked out in the cowboy suit by the local Keno wall, pencil thin, way back then, trying to digest it all. Mama worked at the neighborhood house by the big wide swimming pool. Daddy was an insurance man. My brothers both went to school. I was prone to playing the role of a man called Mr. Cowardly, renaming all the stars from underneath parked cars down on Saragossa Street. I knew all the cowboy stars in the Calford Daily News, Gene and Roy to Joel McRae and even Latch LaRue. Every night in the attic, Daddy ran his model trains. Mama played the radio, the Weavers sang Good Night Irene. We played the hand life deltas with a minimum of schemes. Who would think Palatka would be the city of our dreams? We moved there in '53 and called the future's bluff, and it came to pass we made middle class. God knows poor was not. Just remember that the wind